Zafrullah, our colleague. This is informal talk. It will be like chatting, some nice memories with Muhammad, some contribution to mathematics, and so on. In fact, I'm sorry. I thought my talk will be at 2 p.m. In Morocco. I mean, now it's 1:10, I believe. I know, not I believe. I know in United Arab Emirates. Anyway, last night I calculated the time and I thought the difference between us is 4, but it turns out it's only 3 hours. So I'm glad that Muhammad sent me an email reminding me of my talk. Okay, first I'd like to make a comment on the title of the conference, Young Mathematician, I think. Is that the name, Muhammad? The E-Conference of Young.
Yes,
So
International Conference of Young Researchers in Algebra and Number Theory.
yes, and I
Yeah.
like, and this is kind of, thank you very much for considering me as, young. On February 14, I will be 60 years old. And to feel young, this is,
Yeah.
so thank you.
You are always considered very young by your works. In fact, your active research are a research of an active young researcher.
Thank you, Muhammad.
Thank
I'm
you.
just kidding. But the title, young, I said, what? Young? Am I young?
Young research. Yeah.
Okay. Uh, First, before I talk about Muhammad work, I'm gonna tell you the first time I met Muhammad Zafrullah in person in 1999, I was a visiting faculty at University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And maybe I think most of you and all of you maybe know David Anderson. And he was visiting also David Anderson at the same time. So this is the first time I met him. And something about Muhammad in common with me, and we get to talk and know each other more. Both of us were a smoker at that time. So we used to go outside and we smoked together. And in fact, he was heavy smoker. I'm not sure if you know that about Muhammad. Muhammad Zafrullah was a heavy smoker. He smoked a lot. Uh, and so I get to know him. Uh, and then, we start receiving some email together from time to time and so on. Uh, he has an interesting character and he's very friendly. Yeah, I can say that. He has his own character, but you have to know how to deal with him because Muhammad Zafrullah, kind of person, sometimes he feel like paranoid, uh, and maybe this is we all have some kind of uh, things in our life. Okay, so let me tell you briefly about his life and his contribution to multiplicative ideal theory. First, Muhammad Zafrullah, he finished his PhD in mathematics in 1974, and he worked under Paul Mortis Cohn. The last name you spell it Cohn. And after finishing and that was from the University of London, his PhD, 1974. And then the first, I think, 2, 3 years after finishing his PhD, uh, he worked in Libya for 2 years or maybe more. And then he left to the United States of America, and there he met many commutative ring or commutative algebraists. One of them is Dan Anderson. Maybe some of you or all of you know Dan Anderson. And Dan Anderson, by the way, died 3 months before Zafrullah. So both of them, they were like 3 months apart. Muhammad Zafrullah died in July, I believe, and Dan in April, 3 months apart. And Dan and Zafrullah, both of them, wrote together many fundamental papers in algebra, in commutative algebra, in particular multiplicative ideal theory. Uh, and he has some contribution in the D plus M construction. He made contribution there. He worked on invertibility of ideals. T invertible. I think most of you or all of you are familiar with that. He worked on almost proofer domain. He worked on factorization domain, T locally domain, H local domain, GCD domain, he has many contribution in the field of multiplicative ideal theory. I should mention that Muhammad Zafrullah, if you go and try to see him on the AMS Math Science Net, he has 127 publication, 127, and the total citation on the Math Science Net is 1,775. That's the number of citation he has. Uh, I can say that in the last, just he never stopped doing mathematics, by the way. He never stopped doing mathematics. Just in 2022, which is, just last year, he has 4 publication, and they are like in a very respected and reputed journal. Definitely Muhammad Zafrullah has passion and love to his field, to mathematics. Uh, and definitely, he has, fingerprints in some areas, in some or particular subject in multiplicative ideal theory. Okay, He wrote many papers with, well-known mathematician like Dan, David, and others. You can see that from his publication. For me, I want to finish up by telling you stories about Muhammad Zafrullah. I call them funny stories, and just to remember him, God bless him. And Muhammad Zafrullah in 19, okay, here is the first one. I remember my story with Muhammad Zafrullah. Because dealing with Muhammad Zafrullah, you have to be careful how to deal with him because you are not sure what he means with his emails. I call it Muhammad Zafrullah sense of humor. And if I don't think, I mean, usually I take it in a positive way. Uh, okay, I can tell you some of the stories with Muhammad Zafrullah. One story, in 1999, I met him. I think I told you that in Knoxville, Tennessee. And then I went back home, and at that time I was teaching at Birzeit University in Palestine before I moved to United Arab Emirates. Anyway, then I arrived to United Arab Emirates in 2023. And then, like a few months after that, I received an email from Muhammad telling me this. Oh, glad that you finally settled down and you left the trouble, behind you. Because, in Palestine at the time I left, things were not really very nice. And then he mentioned something like that. Badawi, recently I rejected a paper on phi ring. Phi ring is a class of ring I introduced, and I did not like it. And then below that, he told me, by the way, I just received another uh, invitation to review a paper on firing written by you, but I refused because I am overloaded with work. So I said, okay, thank you, Muhammad. And 1 week later, after the email, I received an email from the editor that my paper got rejected. So I was wondering in his in his email, is he trying to tell me he rejected my paper, but in direct way or not? So it was kind of funny. For me, I was laughing. It's kind of funny. Like he's telling me he rejected a paper on firing because he didn't like it. And then he mentioned, by the way, he received, another. Uh, so for me, I like his sense of humor. Maybe you get my point on that. I can tell you another story about Muhammad. Uh, we wrote a book on David Anderson, the, anyway, and he contributed one chapter. And one time during, preparing the book, uh, we received an email from him, me and my co-editor, Jim Koikandol. Jim Koikandol, maybe some of you know the name, an email, and he's telling us something. And then I notice on the email there is a Bruce Olberding another commutative algebraist on the email. I start laughing because I love his sense of humor, by the way, Muhammad. For me, I consider it like laughing matter in a way. I said, what this has to do with the Bruce? He's sending me and Jim, you know, some information or something, and then he put the Bruce Alberding on the email. And so this is like, in Arabic, they say, الحكي إلك واسمع يا جارة. So it was kind of interesting. I loved, I mean, his character is kind of different, but he's very, very sweet, by the way, and very helpful. And many young people approach him, and he has his own, you know, personal web page to, like if you have a question or thing like that, he will be more than happy to help a student with things like that. But I mean, these are some of the stories I remember dealing with him. Yeah, here is another one with Muhammad Zafrullah. I think we met again in Cortona, Italy, in one of the conferences. And in that conference, I introduced two absorbing ideals. This is my first talk on two absorbing ideals. And there were many commutative ring theorists there. And, you know, it seems like, many of them, they did enjoy the talk. And after I finished and I was outside, Muhammad Zafrullah came to me and he told me this. I remember that exactly. And I think this is maybe a compliment from him. He told me, you created a cure for an unknown disease. I created a, a cure for an unknown disease. I said, okay, thank you, Muhammad. So, but we hope we will not have disease. Yeah, he has his own character, and by the way, he always paranoid about people stealing his work, and maybe many of us sometime, uh, and maybe he has right in some cases, and sometimes he's overdoing it. Uh, but Muhammad Zafrullah, for me, as Ayman Badawi, definitely, if I have to name the top commutative algebraist in the last maybe century in the 90, definitely Muhammad Zafrullah is one on the list. That's from Ayman Badawi point of view. Yeah, another thing about Muhammad, maybe some of you don't know, that he had the kidney problem. So he used to go and do what they call it, washing, or I think once a week or something. Uh, so he has this problem. Um and I think, I think that's enough for me. I thought I just share some memories of Muhammad Zafrullah with you, and thank you very much. I stop here. Hello.